How's it going, guys? It's your boy Mike from Seattle, and I'm going to go ahead and break down for you today the reason why you can no longer afford to invest in Seattle. Before you click out of this video and say to yourself, I don't want to listen to a guy who's wearing a Marvel t-shirt. Clearly, this young millennial man-child is more obsessed with comics than he is with actually making money. And while you might be right, I do care more about the battle between Captain America than I do between the current battles of political parties going on right now. I actually have a good and valid point to make, and I'm very concerned that you are going to fall trapped to the same mistakes that so many millions of home buyers and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of real estate investors are making right now in major coastal cities or major expensive marketplaces all around the country. So a friend of mine called me up, a guy I work with. He's looking for a multi-family property to purchase here in the Seattle area. And he's been looking for small apartment buildings, and he finally found a four-plex. The four-plex actually happens to be only a mile from where I live right now. So he called me up to ask what I thought the property could be rented for. So I asked him a few questions about it. It's a four-plex. They're all exactly the same. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 1 garage. Relatively recent updates in terms of like kitchens look a little bit nicer. And he's looking at putting an offer on it. Now, what does the property cost? $850,000. Guys, I'm going to be straight up with you. I'm going to have to throw some numbers at you here because the only way I can explain why it makes 0 sense financially for you to invest in a market like Seattle or another major market where this is happening is if I actually do the math and explain to you in easy terms to understand why you cannot waste your money and get caught up in this emotional joyride roller coaster of let's get into multifamily properties because this is what I watch on YouTube. So here's what we got going on. An $850,000 property, that's the asking price. When he called me, it had been on the market for 2 hours. The reason he's calling me so quickly is because the property that he had looked at the day before that had only been on the market 1 day, that he put a $25,000 over asking price offer on, and that was for $950. He offered $975 and lost to a full cash buyer. This is the insanity we're dealing with around here and why I chose to go to the Midwest. But bear with me, stick with me. So he looks at this new property and goes, I got to take action on it right away because if I don't, it might be gone. And you know what? The thing honestly might be gone already. I haven't checked yet today, but I went and looked at the property to figure out what I could figure out. Now, a couple things we need to keep in mind. He's buying a multifamily property, so we need to take into consideration what is it rented for. So I asked him, what is it rented for? Because he asked me, what do I think it can rent for? And he told me of the 4 units, 2 of them are rented for $1,100. 2 of them are rented for $1,300. Now, this is the huge issue I have with all of these properties coming on the market out here in the Seattle area. These people who bought these properties 20, 30, 40 years ago have not been responsible landlords. They never bothered to raise their rent to even close to what market value should be. $1,100 and $1,300 if you're not familiar with Seattle. The area that I'm in right now, I would be amazed, absolutely flabbergasted if they couldn't get $1,600 a piece easily. But here's the thing, when you're running numbers, you can't just run off a hypothetical or a theoretical number. I don't trust appreciation. I don't trust what I think I can get the rents to. I trust what it's actually at today, here and now, because that's what it's renting for now. Don't just assume you can go in and raise the rents and people will pay it. We've got a moratorium on evictions. We have the COVID-19 thing keeping people who just come together and say, yeah, we're not paying rent. It's not as easy as it sounds. But my frustration with the existing landlords is they bought the property for $450,000 back in 2005. So almost $400,000 less than what it is they want for it right now. And at their mortgage back then, we're going to assume their mortgage had a similar interest rate to today and they amortized it over a 30-year period. So we're going to assume that their mortgage was $2,750 a month. Well, $1,100, $1,100, $1,300, and $1,300 equals $4,800 a month. Now that, you subtract the $2,750 from the $4,800 and you end up with a positive cash flow of $2,050 a month. Now you still need to set aside 10% for vacancies and 10% for maintenance. So another $480 for vacancies, $480 for maintenance, and you end up with like, I don't even know what the math on that is right now, $960, yeah, $960 less. So you still end up with over $1,000 of positive cash flow every month. That's not a bad deal. That is a great deal. But what happens when those exact same rents now have to cover the new mortgage? Because a mortgage on an $850,000 property, the mortgage by itself is going to be $4,150. Okay, so now we've eaten up almost all of our income from rent just in paying the mortgage, the insurance, and the taxes on the property. Now we got to set aside that same 10% for vacancies and that same 10% for maintenance, and you've set aside an additional $960, so $4,150 plus $900. We're now into the $5,000 range. We're like, gosh, don't make me do the math. It's like $5,100 or something like that, and you are now negative $300 in cash flow every month. And you've bought yourself an alligator property. You are now going to feel the pain and the wrath of not having a cash flow property from day one. So that's of course why he's asking me, hey, what do I think the rents can get up to? Well, I think they could get up to $1,600. Honestly, you might even be able to push for more than that. It's near a lake, it's in a beautiful neighborhood. If you actually go on Craigslist and Google the neighborhood and the city that this property is in, there isn't a single other 2-bedroom, 1-bath property in the entire city that is for rent right now because it is such a hot area. I was like, you know what, I'll go do my thing where I look at apartments.com and Craigslist. I compare and contrast similar square footage, everything to get my rental price. No problem. Oh, I can't because there's literally nothing else. The closest apartments were 15 miles away. The closest similar properties were 15 miles away from where he's at in a completely different city with a completely different demographic and living and everything. You can't compare the two. Luckily for him, I stay up to date. As Michael Zuber says, you need to know your market. I need to know my market for rents because I own here. And so I'm up to date with what things can rent for, and I'm able to give him a realistic expectation, and that expectation is $1,600 a month. But to estimate on the conservative side, I told him he needs to do his calculations at $1,400 a month. And even that is not what he's actually bringing in. Who knows how long it's going to take for him to get people bumped up to current market value rent, or let their leases expire and then get current market value rent, or have to go through the eviction process, or the coronavirus continues to make things difficult. Who knows how long, months, years before he actually gets people to where they should be. I have no clue, but we're going to use $1,400 a month to estimate on the conservative side. So $1,400 a month, let's say he's miraculously getting it day one. $1,400 a month times 4 is a total of $5,600 a month. Now at that $5,600 price point, it at least brings us back into the positive cash flow area. We subtract the $4,150 out for the mortgage and taxes and insurance. We set aside 10% and 10% for the vacancies and maintenance, and we end up with a total of for $330 a month. Now, he's positively cash flowing $330 a month. Now here's the thing. $330 a month to your bottom line is not going to change your life. It's not going to make you rich. It's not going to do anything for you. Yes, I can hear the naysayers in the comments tippity-tap typing away as they say, well, he's building equity. And sure, he is building equity. Somebody else is paying off a very valuable asset. And what about appreciation, Mike? This is a great area. It's going to go up in value. You're 100% right. It absolutely could. You know, unless we have something like a rogue political election that screws the economy, or the trade war with China and it screws the economy, or Mount Rainier decides to pop off like Mount St. Helens and flatten half the value. I am not one to bank on appreciation, okay? I don't trust lawyers and I don't trust appreciation because it could happen. Or we could have what happened in 2007 to 2008 and houses lost 50% of their value almost overnight and took, 10 years to recover. And in some places in our country, they've never recovered. Here they have, but in some places they haven't. So I don't bank on appreciation because it's not guaranteed. Nor do I bank on what the rents could be because that's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed other than what you have. He's got a positive cash flow of $330. Great. That is something that I'm acceptable with. But let's take it one step further, and this is why I think it is so stupid to invest here in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, or in any major city. $850,000 purchase asking price of this property. Now, if you know anything about financing rentals, you know that the bank is going to ask for a minimum of 20% down. Now, with a property this expensive, it would not be unreasonable for them to ask for 25 or even 30% down. But let's just go ahead and say that the bank's going to ask for 20% down. Well, what's 20% of 850 grand? $170,000. So for the mere investment of $170,000, my friend from work can buy himself $330 of cash flow each month. Now, this may seem a little bit odd. I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how I've always viewed money and how I've always viewed things. When I got my first paycheck when I was 14 years old working at McDonald's for $5.25 an hour, and I got that paycheck after working 20 hours, and it said $100. I immediately looked at that $100, and because I was a poor, starving young child that didn't really have much, I thought in terms of food. And I looked at $100, and I saw 20 $5 hot and ready Little Caesars pizzas. I can go out and buy 20 hot and ready Little Caesars pepperoni pizzas. This is enough for me to eat like for, a whole week. I was a growing kid and really skinny. And I look at that, and this is how I equate things nowadays. $330 worth of cash flow. Let's just call it a $330 Little Caesars hot and ready pepperoni pizza. Now, I can buy this Little Caesars hot and ready $330 cash flowing pepperoni pizza for 170 grand. Or I can go to the Midwest and find another property that cash flows for $330 after vacancies and maintenance and after property taxes and insurance and the principal and interest on the mortgage. I can get that same $330 a month Little Caesars hot and ready pepperoni pizza cash flow for 7 grand. 170 grand? 7 grand. I understand people are afraid to go out of town. People are afraid to step out of their comfort zone. People are afraid to have to manage something from afar. When the difference is $163,000, you can afford to make a lot of mistakes out here and never come close to the money you spent to buy this one property. Now let's say he buys it. Great, you bought this property. You're making $330 a month. That's the equivalent of half of one overtime shift for me. Most of the overtime shifts I work, 12-hour shifts, $50 an hour is $600. $330 a month. You're not going to get rich off that. Not going to change your bottom line. Not going to really do anything for you unless you hold the property for 30 years and pay it down, and now at least you own a hopefully appreciated $850,000, maybe $1 million property by that time. Now over here, the way that I like to look at things is I want as many Little Caesars hot and ready pizzas as possible. Just like I thought when I was 14, I'm a hungry kid. I want as many pepperoni pizzas as I can possibly get, maybe some crazy bread thrown in for good measure, and a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper if I'm feeling randy. How do I get more of those? Well, this one costs 7 grand, but this franchise out here in Washington, well, this one cost me 170 grand. So how many of these ones can I buy for that same 170 grand? I can literally afford to buy 24 for the same $170,000. I can buy this cash flowing $330 Little Caesars hot and ready pepperoni pizza 24 times. What's 24 times $330 a month? Now I'm looking at a positive cash flow after all vacancies, maintenance, property, taxes, insurance, and all that stuff. I have now given myself the cash flow of $7,920 a month. Now that is how you change your life right there, because that is replacing an income. Let's multiply that out over 1 year times 12. That is a $95,040 a year on your bottom line. That has replaced almost a 6-figure income. So when I sit here and I try to explain to people why I think it's a bad idea to invest in your local big coastal city, this is the reason why. I get appreciation. I understand it. I understand building equity in a more valuable property. I get it. I get that if it goes up even 10%, you can refinance and pull a heck of a lot more money out. But all of that is hypothetical, theoretical, and hoping and banking on the fact that nothing goes to crap, which I just, don't like to gamble that the American economy won't take a poop at some point. I like cash flow. I like guaranteed cash flow. I'm going to really quickly explain the deal that I'm looking at right now in the Midwest, in the same exact city that I just bought my second property. I'm going to explain to you the deal that I'm looking at right now. I'm going to give you the numbers so you can see that this $7,000 will buy me $330 worth of cash flow. I'm going to explain it to you. I'm looking at a house right now that costs $35,000. Okay? Now, I'm going to do it owner financing, seller financing. A 70-year-old gentleman wants to get rid of a bunch of properties. He owns a few hundred rentals out in the same city that I just bought my last one at. He's trying to sell some of them because he wants to, for whatever reason, I guess, maybe become a little more liquid. Now, what he's looking to do is not do 30-year seller financing because he's in his 70s and probably won't make it 30 years. Understandable. That's not me trying to be rude, but it's understandable. He wants to do 15-year mortgages. Makes the cash flow a little bit harder because I got to make bigger payments, but how do we make it happen? He's even willing to go as low as 10% down. Now, in order to make a cash flow at the rate that I'm comfortable with, I've got to at least put 20% down. So we're going to assume that the 20% down, and as I pull my computer up here to make sure that I keep all my math right, we're going to assume that my 20% down, I'm going to take this times 0.2, that's $7,000, $35,000, 20% of that is $7,000, okay? So I'm giving him $7,000 up front. Now, my estimated mortgage on this property, and I'm over here looking at my computer right now, my estimated mortgage, principal and interest plus insurance and taxes, is $264 a month, okay? So $264. Now, what's the property currently rented at? It's rented at $750. So $750 is what the current rent is. Now, there's an estimated rent that the property management company thinks they can get it to. I don't care about that. I don't trust it. I don't believe they can do it, because if they could, why didn't they do it earlier? It would have helped them. They're the one who get a certain percentage of the payment for a monthly rent. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Right now it's rented at $750. That's what I'm going to run my numbers off of. So $750 a month minus my principal and interest and taxes and insurance. We're going to subtract that $264. Okay. Now I'm going to subtract 10% for vacancies and 10% for maintenance. So $750, 10% of that is $75. So subtract $75 for vacancies, $75 for maintenance, about $336. I'm actually beating my friend who works here by $6 a month. Cost me $7,000 to get in. So I can buy the exact same cash flow for 1/24th. That's a fraction so small that it's almost competing for the amount of Native American heritage that certain presidential candidates may have that were running at one point this last election. Why would you ever say to yourself that it is a good idea to spend $170,000 to get $300 in cash flow? Now let's say that he gets that $1,600 a month in rent. Let's say that he never has a single repair and there's never any vacancies, because, you know, that's a realistic expectation. And he's actually walking around with a full-blown $1,500 worth of cash flow. He still spent $170,000 to get $1,500 worth of cash flow. If I take my $330 and get that up to $1,500, that's 5 properties. So what's 5 times my $7,000 down payment? $35,000. I can still spend $35,000 to get the exact same cash flow as him, leaving me accounting for vacancies and maintenance when he isn't. I'm still destroying him by finding a better market. And you know what the scariest part is? This deal, my actual recommendation to him was this contextualized in the greater Seattle real estate market. This is actually a good deal. This is actually a good investment. You need to know your market so that you know a bad, average, good, and great deal. This is a good deal. Isn't that scary? Wouldn't it make you wonder what the bad ones are? I've looked at them. The bad ones don't even come close to cash flowing and never will. And yet they get bid up $50,000 and go pending within a day or two of going on the market every single day. This is why I think we are in a bubble. This is why I'm extremely concerned for your Seattle real estate investor who is trying to buy multifamily properties. They are too popular. There is too much fluff around them on the internet. There's too much hype. Everyone's excited. Everyone's looking, and we are bidding each other up and getting emotional. Well, I shouldn't say we, because I'm not. People are going to get taken advantage of. Someone is going to buy this property, and they're going to learn the hard way that they can't get rents to what they want. Or even if they do, they now locked up $170,000 worth of capital, cash, to get $330 a month in cash flow, which is terrible. I mean, it's great, but it's terrible when compared, contextualized on a national level for what you can get buying small single-family residences or duplexes or triplexes or even fourplexes in the Midwest, in the South. Heck, just go to the other side of Washington and you can save 50 to 60% off the top of the cost. That same property in the Tri-Cities, Yakima, Richland in Washington would probably be somewhere around $250,000 instead of $850,000. Guys, hopefully this video enlightened you a little bit, maybe made you think before you buy something in your local market. I'm not saying don't buy something. We all have to live somewhere. And if you like living in that big city, doing what I do by buying a $450,000 duplex and house hacking it is still beneficial to me long term, because I do need to live here. I'm saving money on my living expenses. But when I realized that it was going to come time for me to actually invest 20% down on rental properties, it just made no sense. It makes no sense for me to do it. This guy and his wife both have six-figure salaries. They work full-time. That's the only reason they're even able to come up with that down payment. If you are someone who's trying to get started, you're on your first, your second property, this is not the place for you. Seattle, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Miami, all these other big cities that have similar issues to this, Boston, probably even Las Vegas, man, look outside of your comfort zone, because even if you completely screw up, even if you botch it, and even if you had to pay out a lawsuit because you were so bad, you'll still be nowhere near the initial investment that my friend is going to take if he even gets that property. If it doesn't get bid up another 50 grand and he loses out on it, because that's a very real possibility, I don't want to see you get taken advantage of. Hopefully this keeps you from getting into too much trouble. If you liked this video, leave a comment down below, subscribe. I literally am making this stuff to try to help you. So help me out, give me something to marvel at, and click the button down, like the... We'll see you next time.